Welcome to the MYBcast, a channel offering podcasts devoted to the art and science of somatic touch therapy. Somatic touch therapy is an alternative for self-care that recognizes the important role the body plays in our day-to-day life. We are fascinated with the mind-body connection, and so are the people we talk with. From pioneers who helped to originate or develop this work, to seedlings of somatic mindfulness who have adopted principles of this work in their massage practices, our guests will uplift, educate, and inspire you. Thanks for joining us. Please like, subscribe, and share. Now let's join our hosts.
Welcome back to another episode of Portraits of the Pioneers. Hi, I'm Richard Mack, and I'm here with my co-host Anna Marie Bowers. We're about to embark on a mini-series on a topic that deeply impacts each and every one of us, the human body. When I took my first anatomy class for my massage license, it was 100 hours of relatively intense human body anatomy, which gave me a good understanding of the basics of how the human body functions. When I finished that class, I was absolutely dumbfounded that it took me a half of a lifetime to expose myself to human anatomy. This important and fundamental information should have been part of my grade school, if not my high school curriculum. Reading, writing, arithmetic. What about the most important thing, which is how to care for my body? Every one of us has a body that carries us through our life's journey, and it's fundamentally important to understand our body and how it functions. Reading the owner's manual of our body and knowing how it functions can make all the difference between the quality of life we live in a healthy and happy body. So that's what we're going to explore in this mini-series. And who better to guide us through this amazing journey than the renowned author of Job's Body, teacher and well-respected pioneer of somatic touch therapy, Deane Juhan. I first met Deane as my anatomy teacher for my Traeger Approach certification curriculum. Deane took me on a journey through the human body in that class that left me in awe and complete respect for the wonderful creation the human body really is. Since that class, I've attended many of his classes and a variety of specific anatomy topics. He is the master. His many years of devotion and exploration of the human body, from his thorough understanding of the scientific and medical published literatures, his many years of hands-on experience in discovery as the lead body worker at the world-renowned Esalen Institute, and his wonderful gift of as a teacher, this is truly a treat, and we think you're going to enjoy it. So with me on this interview series with Deane Juhan, I have my co-host, Anna Marie Bowers, and joining us is our executive producer, Madalena Ferreira. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Deane Juhan. Deane, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's lovely to be with you all again. And the four episodes that we are beginning to tape today have to do with an introduction to my archives of webinar tapings that are on my website, jobsbody.com. And these webinars have been the accumulation of the last few years of doing 2 to 2.5 hour lectures with slides on a wide variety of topics. I'm talking about anatomy on one hand, and not just your tired old anatomy book, origin, insertion, memorization anatomy. It's my view is a functional approach to anatomy. What are all these things doing as we move through our lives? We will also be talking about various aspects of our physiology and how our movement patterns intersect with virtually every other molecular interchange that fuels our body. We'll be looking deeply at connective tissue and its functions, its makeup and functions in our body. We'll be looking at a variety of neurological functions, focusing primarily on the sensory motor system, which is the command station for all of our postures and movements. And in addition to that, there are webinars on the tyranny of anxiety, how anxiety profoundly affects all of our mental and physiological functions, and traumas, what constitute the aftermaths of trauma in our minds and in our bodies, in our somatic existence as a whole. So that's the spread of topics that I'm going to be introducing you to in these 4 episodes. This first episode is a general overview of my vision of how all of those systems work together and some fundamental principles that animate my thinking about all those topics. It all began for me, this journey into bodywork, in 1974, when I, quite by accident, was introduced to Esalen Institute. Spent some time there over the summer, and when fall came and it came time for me to go back to complete my PhD program in Berkeley in English literature, I was offered a job on one of the Esalen crews. Uh, I paused at my car for about 30 seconds, put my keys away, and said, "What do you want me to do?" And that began a 19-year residency at Esalen Institute, during which time I was a member of the Esalen massage crew and began discovering and honing my craft. During that time, I met Dr. Milton Traeger, who fundamentally changed my direction of my thinking, of the kind of work I've been doing, and everything that followed in the train of that meeting. I became a Traeger practitioner, later an instructor, and was an innovator of much of the teaching curriculum of the Traeger Institute. So, Esalen Institute, it was an immersion of a very new kind, an experimental laboratory in which stars of the time in somatic fields, psychological fields, and various intellectual fields rotated through as seminar leaders. It was an immersion in holistic philosophy, of innovations in emotional therapy and an emotional process, innovations of bodywork of all kinds, and under the general umbrella, which was coined at Esalen Institute at the time, the Human Potential Movement, a creative laboratory exploring human consciousness and its potentials and our potentials as human beings. Some of the early founders of the seminar series were luminaries like Aldous Huxley, Alan Watts, Abraham Maslow, Fritz Perls, Ida Rolf, Charlotte Selver, and so many more. I got there a little bit after their time, but as I immersed myself in the Esalen culture, and in particular the bodywork, this is the Esalen campus. And speaking of, this was my little niche down here. This is the Esalen hot baths. And this is where the hot springs were located, the massage facility was located, and where I spent 19 years doing my thing there. My experience there on the somatic body system side of things led me in my residency there to the exploration and research that finally led to Job's Body, a handbook for body work, my principal publication. And that was organized around a very simple principle. our organism's primal need for touch. The simple fact is, without touch, you will die. This seemed rather significant, and that was the pole star of my career from that moment forward. Now, at Esalen, it was not only what was going on there, but it was a time of great ferment in the culture and in the realms of philosophy, holistic views of the body instead of chopped up into parts and compartments. Uh, Holistic views of the mind and its interplay with the body, understanding the fact that there was not a mind and a body, there was a unified field of mental and physical aspects that formed our consciousness and our behavior. It was those summers of love and national transformation, psychedelic discoveries of the dimensions of the mental sphere of many kinds. And touch therapy had been around for a very, very long time, thousands of years. But this period was an explosion of new techniques, new massage schools, new trainings of many kinds, and a public awakening to their value. For 50 years, my curiosity has been piqued to educate myself about our bodies and our minds, how they work and interweave, how they form a unity, and how all of that creates the substance and experience and volition of our lives. These archives include 50 and counting slide lectures, uh, each 2.5 hours. And they represent the long evolution of my understanding of human function and the human potential. These slides and lecture material have been gleaned from dozens of books over decades of poking around. Now, I want to say some of this material indeed comes from textbooks with which I educated myself. Uh, some of it could only come by physically and emotionally and verbally interacting with thousands of clients over the years. And some of what I want to talk about in these archives uh, uh, runs counter to the received wisdom that we will find in textbooks. In fact, I find some of the textbook approaches quite misleading in terms of how the body, the mind, the emotions, and our behavioral systems actually work. I'm reminded of one of my favorite comments by Mark Twain. It's not what you don't know that gets you. It's what you do know that just ain't true. And so with that being said, uh, let us begin looking at some of my overall principles and what they have come to mean for me and my approach to my work and my clients. What is our organism? Our organism is a dynamic arrangement of energy. The physicists tell us that there is nothing but energy anywhere in the cosmos. The dichotomy between energy and matter is a false dichotomy. What we call matter is arrangements of energy. That's what atoms are. That's what molecules are. Um, and our organism further continually reorganizes energy through our experiences, our perceptions, our habits, our skills, the blocks that we develop, beliefs that we develop, responses to trauma that we are forced to accommodate, and all of these influences in our lives. All of this amounts to a rearrangement of the fundamental vibrations of energy that constitute uh, what we call our physical body and what the Eastern traditions have looked at in a very different, from a very different lens, the energetic aspects of the body and its arrangements. Over time, these accumulations of rearrangements of energy become to define who we are and what we are capable of and what we are not capable of. Therapy fundamentally is about freeing us from these restrictions that have developed over the past and giving us a renewed sense of freedom and agency in our lives. Freedom to move, freedom to think, freedom to feel, freedom to integrate my full capacities as this astonishing thing, a human being, into my own life and my interactions with others, and ultimately the development of the direction of the human race on this planet. When I think about muscles, there are a number of fundamental principles that have guided my thinking and my work with regard to this astonishing thing, our muscular system. Muscles are unlike anything else we know about in the universe. They are a flickering ductile system that can be hard as wood or as free-flowing as water, all transforming in split seconds. So, first of all, I like to think of the three 90% when I look at this muscle system. The first 90% is 90% of our body mass and its makeup is tissue that is devoted to movement. The arrangement of muscle packages, the connective tissue that unites all those packages and gives them vectors of performance. And 90% of our system then is devoted physically to movement-related tissues. The second 90% is, surprisingly, it takes 90% of the nervous system's, entire nervous system's activity to organize muscular movement. 90%. And the third 90% for me is 90% of that organizing process takes place in the unconscious mind, the subconscious, the preconscious, below our threshold of thinking things through. Otherwise, I would be capable of nothing. The one thing I have conscious control of is my intention. Deane intends to raise his arm and wriggle his fingers. That intention I am in control of. I say, body, do this for me. How that is done involves trillions of variables going by in split seconds of time that I could not possibly think my way through. This is the miracle of what our unconscious reservoir of wisdom developed through millennia of evolution, millennia of evolutionary processes, has delivered to us. Another set of principles is no one muscle does any one thing. All muscles act in a synergistic variety of functions with muscles around it and indeed muscles from all over the body. And no muscle ever acts alone. You can't just contract a muscle. It always involves a synergy of surrounding muscles and extensive muscular interplays that happen at the same time. Every muscle in the body is always doing one of four things. It is shortening, or it is lengthening, or it is bracing so that the cantilevered weights and momentum do not destabilize my core structure, and everything not directly involved in that movement and that bracing is held in a neutral position so it doesn't interfere with Deane intending to raise his right arm and wriggle his fingers. Shortening, lengthening, bracing, remaining neutral. Those are the four roles that every muscle in the body is always doing at all times. And those roles change in split seconds of time as I go through any motion and my relationship to gravity shifts, and what needs to shorten and lengthen, what needs to brace, and what needs to be held still uh, changes rapidly as I perform any motion and any activities in my lives. So I think it is really much more useful to think of one muscle that is a synergistic organization of hundreds of millions of participating cells. And that one muscle is activated, programmed, and trained by one single integrative nervous system. The nervous system doesn't work in the boxes that all of our textbooks have given us. It's one integrated whole. And one integrated, interconnected webbing of connective tissue, which provides the vectors of movement for those muscle cells as they shorten, contract, brace, and whatnot. And finally, when I think of muscles, I think of the fact that no muscles do not switch on or off. That's not how the control of muscle works. All muscles are continually being stimulated by their motor nerves. And what changes is not on off, but different frequencies of rhythms. If I contract a muscle, the rhythm speeds up of stimulation. When I lengthen a muscle, the rhythm of stimulation slows down. And when I hold a muscle in bracing or out of the picture so as not to interfere, there is a constant holding tonus, holding pattern of stimulation. This is what happens when we go through movements. Rhythms changing constantly throughout our body, involving every single muscular cell. Now, what I want to go to now in our slide content is I will just be rolling some slides through to give you an idea of the kinds of varieties of pictures and subject matter that are contained in all of these 50 plus archives. So I will be commenting, and at the same time, just let the slides roll by and wash over your eyes. Now I want to turn my speaking attention to some basic principles of the nervous system. First and foremost, thinking again of Mr. Twain, it does not work like electrical circuitry. The nervous system is not electrical circuitry. It is made up of axons, which are fluid-filled tubes, not conductive wires. I can stand on the wire that's powering this computer, and the computer will work fine. I cannot park pressure on parts of my axonal nervous system structures and have it work fine. It relies on fluid moving through those tubes and fluid surging back and forth across the membranes of those tubes in a wave we call the action potential, which delivers the not blue spark, but fluid squirt of stimulation to the next neuron in line. And second principle, its functioning cannot be separated into the domains we read about in the anatomy books. Uh, my hearing centers, my vision centers, my cognitive and memory centers, my reflex spinal cord circuitry network. Uh, None of those can be in any functional way divided in what they're up to in any given moment. It is a constant surge through the whole system that constitutes the fluctuating patterns that produce thought, feelings, emotions, movements, memory, storage, and the like. And all areas are interactive with all other areas. These past few slides have been taking a look at uh, um, how it is we perform that one fundamental function that ensures our survival, and that is breath. How do we get oxygen in a form of prana, if you will, and CO2 out? And how do we distribute all of that throughout the body? And when it comes to leaving the circulatory system, how do all those, how does all that fuel and oxygen migrate over to living cells in order to fuel its metabolism? We go into this at great extent in the breath webinar lectures. Now, another thing that I spend a great deal of attention to in a number of these webinars is connective tissue. Connective tissue is an astonishing substance. There are many names for it and many forms of it. We call it loose networks, such as the attachment of the skin, which is quite flexible, as you can see. We call it sheaths surrounding structures like muscles and organs. We call it tendon. We call it ligament. We call it periosteum when it surrounds the bones. Uh, Collectively, we call it fascia. All of this is made up of the same molecular substance. All of these structures are made up of collagen molecules, which give it its fibrous strength, and of ground substance molecules, which give it its watery, flexible, aqueous, ductile nature. This connective tissue both divides and unites all structures in my body. It is one continuous matrix from skin to bones, and from the soles of my feet to my scalp, from large structures to infinitesimally microscopic meshes that extend into every nook and cranny of the body. And it transfers all muscle movements to the skeleton to create movement. That is its mechanical energy. It is also a generator and a semiconductor of electromagnetism, electromagnetic energy. It is an energetic medium that is coursing electromagnetic energy throughout my body and delivering it down into the molecular precincts of every living cell and as part of its metabolic source of fuel. This whole connective tissue structure is a spider web-like antenna that extends throughout the body. And like a spider's web, when the spider sits in the center of its web, it contracts its legs. And as it contracts its legs, it puts a tension on all the fibers in the web. this tension in the web is read by the spider to feel the breezes, feel where a gnat lands exactly on that matrix of the web, so it knows just where to jump. Uh, our connective tissue matrix acts as an antenna of a similar kind for us. It is sensitive to all forms of vibration. It is sensitive to all forms of energetic penetration. It is sensitive to all the vagaries of the changing of the tensions in that web as I move my body around in space, and is part of the stream of information that guides me and keeps me functioning as a whole integrated and functioning unit. Let me ask my gallery here if any questions have arisen in the scope of my comments to date.
Well, I got to say, you have already shared so much, given us such a wealth of information. I really look forward to more. I'm already making lots of notes. As far as questions, I don't have any specific questions. I think it's just been abundantly clear.
Well, thank you.
Carry on, Deane.
Yes, well, let us look at a few slides to briefly recap some of the things I'm looking at when we do our diving into the connective tissue structure. Uh, Here are the ligaments that are keeping the bony structure of a foot connected together and intact and not just falling apart. This is that all famous plantar fascia that is the bowstring of the base of my foot that holds the bones of the foot up into their resilient, springy arch. Uh, Here is that plantar fascia in a little bit more expansive and instructive view. In all of these slide lectures of muscles and connective tissue, we go down layer by layer from superficial large structures into deeper and deeper smaller structures as they organize. This is a picture that I love to contemplate.
Hmm.
This single-celled organism changed the course of animal evolution fundamentally. It showed up many, 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 many millions of years ago. And as single-celled organisms were beginning to differentiate and evolve into different sorts of single-celled critters with different kinds of capacities. This cell showed up at some point in time and had two fundamental specialties. Out of its DNA store of templates of molecular manufacturing, it selected out two basic molecular forms which it generated. One are collagen molecules, which are long, long molecules of a triple spiral helix, which are extremely tough in its tensile strength and have the propensity, once released out into the intercellular fluid, to organize themselves into very tough, microscopically thin cables. Those microscopically thin cables then become the meshwork of the connective tissue throughout our entire system. And it produced one other singular molecular shape out into the intercellular fluid. And this is what we call ground substance. Now, the collagen cables, which form from the collagen marbles, become this very tough and yet very flexible mesh that makes up our movement organizer and our antenna. And what gives that mesh its resiliency, its fluidity, its conductibility is this ground substance molecule. Look at this beauty. This is a singular molecular structure that is held together, many of them, along a central chain of molecules that form a spine. Uh, so looking at this astonishing thing, it's got its own spine. Branching off that are branches. Branching off the branches are other branches. These are all threads of molecules and all threads of organizations of energy, if you will. Well, what does this organization of energy do? Every one of these little nooks and crannies between the strands attracts and binds H2O molecules, water. This is a sponge. And as it binds water and acts as this aqueous, spongy addition to the tough cables of the collagen fibrils, we get not only a very high tensile strength, but a lubricated, fluidly moving uh, um, um, tissue. So as this fibroblast showed up and started spinning out its wares, this was the first time that there was a binding agent. This is a microscopic photograph. These are all fibrils of collagen. Of course, when you prepare a photograph like this, you have to dry the model out of water so you can take this picture. So the ground substance is gone, but it is weaving in and out of all these fibrous shapes. All right, when this mesh, this fibroblast, first started spinning out its wares, it provided a mesh that could contain multiple cells. This was the fundamental leap from single-celled organisms to the concatenation of ever more complex multicellular animals. All right? This was the dawn of our organization as an extremely complex collection of many different kinds of cells, all held together physically by this mesh. And each one of those cells that are held together has its own vibratory rate. And this cell's vibratory rate is transferred through this collagen matrix to the next cell and the next cell and the next cell. So each cell's vibration is sending out vibrational signals to all other cells in the colony. And let us also remember, this is an electromagnetic conductive medium. So electromagnetic energy is also being transferred from each cell through the matrix to all other cells in the body that are ultimately contained in this one matrix meshwork of connective tissue that keeps the whole thing structurally intact, energetically humming, and energetically and mechanically interactive with one another. And this forms the platform of the connective tissue matrix. Each muscle, each organ, each cell, indeed, has its domain within that matrix. And all cells and all domains are connected into one continuous structure, top to bottom, surface to depths. So the question then is, how does our organism, which is a collection of muscular contractive and connective tissue fibers, muscular contractive elements, connective tissue fibers, and bony spacers, managed to shape change and arrange myself into all kinds of different relationships to gravity. Well, that is the net product of all muscles, all of the central nervous system, and all of the connective tissue matrix acting in harmony to create posture and movement. And how on earth is this accomplished? This is going to be the topic of another one of our episodes when we look much more directly at the sensory motor system and that hidden gem of our sensory motor organization, the gamma motor system, the muscle spindles, the Golgi tendon organs, and the joint receptors that provide the streams of information that organize all that behavior. And involved is not just the sensory motor bands across our cortex that we're used to seeing in the textbooks, but all of our memories, all of our associations, all of our beliefs, all of our emotional centers, all of our wiring and rewiring capacities of the brainstem that allows for habituation of skills and habituation of restrictive blocks. The cerebellum, which organizes and monitors all of that behavior before it descends down into the spinal cord reflex system that branches out to actually deliver motor neuron stimulation to muscle cells and set this whole thing into motion. And when we put all that together, and remember that the fundamental principle of therapy is to free ourselves from restrictions that have developed in the past, to open up new dimensions of sensory feeling, of emotional feeling, of belief systems, of intellectual organization of our understanding of this thing we call our soma. This will be the topic of another one of our episodes coming up. Put this all together, and what does it add up to if all things are working for us and we as therapists are participating in maximizing the potentials that each client's system possesses if only they can feel it and find it and make use of it and give themselves the agency to change their lives for the better. And we end up with a much more joyous, intelligent, glowing human being monad that sends out its connections to all other conscious monads around us and has the human potential to transform not only ourselves, but societies and the collective consciousness at large. This is the project. Somebody once asked Dr. Milton Traeger, "What is the purpose of your work?" He paused for a moment and smiled, and he said, "World peace, one body at a time."
Thank you, Deane Juhan. I have to
Wow.
How did our time run?
don't worry
We're
about the
still
time.
we're still recording.
And you know what?
I'm just wondering, how long did that take?
You took an hour. It took an hour. That was
Oh,
about
God.
40 minutes. 40 minutes. But we're still recording, so let's just continue.
Yeah, okay. So feel free to edit and condense as you have to, but if
Yeah.
we got a good solid 40 minutes, that's not bad.
No. But
Yeah.
I
So
was going to.
a couple of questions have occurred to me in the last couple of minutes that I'm hoping you'll address at some point in time. You have described a miraculous system that we are. I get the miracle of humanity and our organism. And I'm curious what happens when two of those touch, you know, like we're talking about the touch, the somatic touch, the modalities that we're working with, and what happens with that touch. So that has occurred to me that I hope you just kind of delve a little bit deeper in at some point in time. And
Oh yeah, marvelous question.
yeah, so I hope we
We
just kind of
are,
go a little deeper into that.
yeah, we as individual organisms, we are contained within our own perceptual field. And my world is that I construct through my perceptual processes and my mental projections is unique to me. Um, I can't really feel your pain. You feel your pain. I can have empathy for your pain. I can do my best to alleviate your pain, but you are the one feeling the pain and everything else that enters our conscious field. What happens with touch is that these two, in important ways, isolated systems of perception and projection meet at the boundary of the skin and merge into the depth of other tissues in the body. And my self contained world of perception and belief and response and whatnot begins to merge through the session with your organism's self contained bubble of perception. In the area where those two systems overlap through the medium, through the language of touch and therapeutically stimulated movement, these two separate organisms with their separate perceptual worlds have an opportunity to merge into a common fusion of mutual understanding of the now. The body is always now. And when we pay attention to this emergence, we enter the domain of the now. And each now presents a moment of potential change and potential shifting of course. The monad of the therapist enters, of course, with years of experience of how to stimulate those changes. The perceptual monad of the client feels these changes. You can't be different till you feel something different. And as those differences are felt through the therapist, things begin to reorganize in the client. And it is fundamentally a merging and a negotiating process that takes place that is most immediately available through the medium and the language of touch.
Thank
Along,
you.
along those lines, Deane, in the world of health care at this point in time, it seems to me that the impact of touch is such a paramount aspect of human health. And as we move into a place of self-care, because quite frankly, who cares more about you than you? You should. The idea of being able to be working with a practitioner that will help you kind of feel yourself from the inside out would be a very important aspect of self-healing. You have any
Well,
comments on that?
this leads me to comment on something that I observed as I started to develop all these pictures and read the books and whatnot. I thought at first I was doing research in how I, as a therapist, could better serve a client by understanding everything that's going on in that client. What I started to discover as time went on is I was getting better. That the more I understood intellectually, cognitively about how this whole thing works, the more that I felt more deeply, both in a sensory sense and in an emotional sense, the more that I understood how all these structures work and interact, and what happens in various injuries, what happens in various traumatic experiences, and all that put together, it gave me a window into feeling, appreciating, and arriving at an agency within myself that was transforming my health, both cognitively, emotionally, and physically. It helps to know what's in here and how it works. And that visualization down to the finest gnat structures is what I've been trying to elucidate all these years, both for our service to the clients and in a way, most importantly, in service of ourselves. You can't give a client what you don't have. So I have to have this understanding. I have to have this emotionally balanced and centered space within myself in order to transmit that information and those feelings and those potentials to a client. So it's quite selfishly been very good for me.
I love that. I always am interested in how practitioners take care of themselves. So that's a great conversation too.
I'm also going to invite our executive producer to step in if she has any questions. Madalena, would you like to ask Deane anything? You,
I probably have hundreds of questions, but I don't know what direction you want to take things. I'm sort of fascinated, Deane, with the way that you focus on the fluid versus the electromagnetic.
mm,
And I wonder about that. How did that emerge for you? And I also wonder, as a person who studied the textbooks and learned all the compartmentalization, which is a pretty handy way to learn it, how did you come to this more holistic approach to the way that you see the body?
Well, to pick up your last question, what you're asking is that which you cannot learn from the books. You can only learn it through thousands of experiences of physically, energetically, through the medium of touch and movement, interacting with other living human beings. The book are just a collection of dead pages and two-dimensional views, and uh, the accumulated best guesses of science as that project has gone on. But actually being in physical and energetic contact with other living organisms and watching the changes that they undergo through your interactions with them, that is the only source that I've had of understanding both the misleading parts of the received wisdom uh, and the discovery of principles and information and guidance that can only come from a living organism. Uh, it's interesting that the medical study of anatomy is primarily with dead people. And it
Good
is
point.
the living anatomy of living people that have led me to the principles I've been trying to enumerate in this segment and lay the foundation for what we'll be looking at in our next three segments.
Well, I certainly would invite our listeners to take a further look at your archives because I'm sure there is just a wealth of information, especially for those listeners who are just listening on podcast. These slides have been phenomenal and really very descriptive pictures of a lot of what Deane's been talking about.
This has been a very brief look at what amounts to hundreds of hours of materials in the archive.
and with that being said, I took you up on your offer to subscribe to the the open library of 50 plus lectures that you've done. And I have to say, I've been a student of yours both in live classes, live Zoom classes, and then, of course, through the library. And the depth of information that you share, Deane, is well worth the subscription to be part of your library. So tell us a little bit of how the library works and how people can participate in that subscription.
Well, you simply need to go to jobsbody.com. That's my website.
Hmm.
You will find there information of how to subscribe to the webinar series. Uh, I have tried to keep that subscription price phenomenally modest because I want to share this information, not just mine it for money. Um, and there you go.
Great. And
Let me say that those 50 are not all, they're not all 50 completely different subjects. I've repeatedly done these webinars, and you will find repeated versions of each webinar and each topic, but each one marks a forward-moving evolution and refinement of my thinking about that particular topic. So, you'll see uh, 8 or 10 lectures on the structure of the shoulder girdle, which we're going to look at next in our series, and so on and so forth. So it's not only uh, singular episodes, but an evolution of my understanding through a series of repeated episodes of the same material. Um,
That's what I find so remarkable about this particular way you're approaching things is that you're able to also show us your own evolution at the same time. And so I find that remarkable and unique.
well, everything's a work in progress, isn't it? I mean, the only way I keep myself having fun is see what's different next time. See what I said last time taught me about what I'm going to say next time, and what audience questions have completely reorganized my thinking. And yeah, that's what keeps life from becoming boring.
Well, Deane, thank you very much for showing up for this episode. I'm going to remind our listeners that are listening to this via audio podcast that we do have a YouTube channel that you'll be able to see the slides that Deane shared with us. And of course, I highly recommend that you go to jobsbody.com and subscribe. I kept a subscription for almost a year, and by going through that, you have unlimited access to play in Deane's world. So, without further ado, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to our next episode with Deane Juhan. Be well.
Thank you very much, all.
Thank you for joining us at MYBcast. We hope you found the stories inspiring. This series has been made possible by our hosts, our production team, and our guests, whose willingness to share their personal stories is vital to educating the public about the power of somatic touch. We're all contributing to creating positive change. Thanks to our sponsors, Mind Your Body, the Foundation for Somatic Touch, and Somatic Mindfulness. Find them on the web at myb.llc. Foundation for Somatic-Touch.org and somaticmindfulness.co. Please like, share, subscribe, and join us again for more interesting, compelling, and heartful stories.